It's a question that haunts me, one that has followed me through more than 30 years of studying vascular health and cholesterol metabolism. You must listen to this story until the very end to understand its full weight. Why do strokes and heart attacks strike like lightning from a clear blue sky? Even in people who get a health screening every single year, why have we been taught that HDL is the good cholesterol, leading us to believe that a high number is an unconditional shield against disaster? When you get your lab results back, with those 4 numbers lined up in a neat column: total cholesterol, triglycerides, HDL, and LDL, which one do you look at first? If you're like most people, you probably scan down to your triglyceride level and cluck your tongue, thinking, I knew I shouldn't have had that dessert. Or perhaps you see a high HDL and breathe a sigh of relief, convinced that you're in the clear. But what if I told you that you might be reading your own story completely backward? What if I told you that among those numbers, there is one, and only one, that if understood correctly, could dramatically reduce your risk of a stroke or a heart attack? The tragedy is that most people don't know which one it is, and they glance right past it, year after year. My name is Dr. Alan Kendrick. For 3 decades, I've dedicated my life to the intricate dance of cholesterol within the human body. I've looked at thousands of lab reports, sat across from thousands of concerned faces, and the single most heartbreaking thing I've witnessed is how often the most important clue is missed. Today, I want to tell you the story of that one number. I want to explain what it truly means and how to look at it, in a way that is simple, clear, and could very well save your life. When you get that screening report, it's just a page of figures, a cold, impersonal list. But within that list is a narrative about your future. For cholesterol alone, you get 4 main characters: total cholesterol, triglycerides, HDL, and LDL. But which one is the protagonist of your health story? So many people fixate on triglycerides, vowing to cut back on fatty foods. So many others see a high HDL and assume all is well. But the number that truly predicts the risk of a stroke, of a sudden, life-altering cardiac event, is something else entirely. I have seen it countless times. A patient comes in, we look at their report together, and they'll say, well, my total cholesterol is a little high, but my triglycerides are fine, so I guess I don't have to worry. They fold up the paper, tuck it away, and go on with their lives. And then, years later, I get a call. I hear their name spoken in a hushed, panicked tone by a family member from an emergency room. I have seen this play out far too many times. This story I'm telling you today is about that critical number. By the time we are finished, I suspect you will feel an urgent need to pull out your own health records and look at them with new eyes. This isn't just information. It's a fundamental shift in how you see your own body. Cholesterol itself isn't a villain. The word sounds clinical and intimidating, but it's a substance our body desperately needs. It's a building block for our cell membranes, a precursor for essential hormones, and it helps us absorb vital vitamins. The problem, as with so many things in life, is one of balance. When there is too much of a certain kind, it begins to accumulate on the walls of our arteries, like scale, building up inside a pipe. Slowly, silently, it narrows the passage. Blood flow becomes restricted, and eventually, the supply of life-giving blood to the brain or the heart can be choked off, leading to a catastrophe. That's why we check these numbers. But just looking at a single figure is like reading only one word on a page. You have to understand the context, the relationship between the different types of cholesterol, and the ratio between them. And the number that tells the most important part of that story, the one called LDL, is a number far too many people have never been taught to fear. Do you get a health screening every year? Every 2 years? The answer to that question can become a lifeline. Just a short while ago, a close friend of mine called me in a state of utter panic. His father, George, had collapsed. He was rushed to the emergency room. George was the kind of man who seemed indestructible. He had normal blood pressure, no diabetes, and his weight was perfectly average for his height. He was diligent, getting his checkup every 2 years like clockwork, But when the doctors in the ICU ran his blood work and compared it to his records, the family was plunged into a state of shock and disbelief. His LDL cholesterol was over 180, and it had been that high for years. The number was there, in black and white, on every report he'd ever received, but no one had ever looked at it with the gravity it deserved. Not his family, not even, it seemed, his regular doctor. They had all been lulled into a false sense of security. His triglycerides are normal, they'd thought. And look, his HDL is nice and high. He must be fine. With those comforting thoughts, they let the years slip by. But inside George's arteries, a silent, slow-motion disaster was unfolding. The vessels leading to his brain were gradually hardening, closing up, until that morning, when one finally blocked completely. He had a massive stroke. As you hear George's story, does a part of you think, that wouldn't happen to me? Do you perhaps think, my results have always been okay, or I don't have any symptoms? So, what's the problem? The hard truth is that most people are not so different from George. The absence of symptoms is not a sign of safety. It's the hallmark of this disease. You feel perfectly fine while the danger builds. So you glance at your report. You see nothing alarming because you don't know what to look for, and you assume everything is all right. I have met so many people who have lived this way for years. Then one day, they appear in my emergency room, clutching their chest, complaining of a dizzy spell, or telling me they can't feel one side of their body. And in that moment of terror, the regret is palpable. I should have paid attention to that number. They say, I should have known. That is why this story is so important. It holds the key to changing the entire way you manage the health of your arteries, and it's a story you have to hear to the end, because the most crucial, practical advice comes last. That one final habit I'll share with you can change everything. A simple misunderstanding of these numbers can lead to ruin, but understanding them, truly understanding them, and acting on that knowledge can grant you a lifetime of health. So let's walk through it together, step by step. Let's look at the common mistakes people make when they read that deceptively simple lab report. And let's connect the dots directly to the prevention of a stroke. The first number that usually catches the eye on a health report is total cholesterol. It's big, it's bold, and it seems like the final verdict, but on its own, this number is almost meaningless. It's like looking at the total score of a baseball game without knowing how many runs each team scored. Total cholesterol is simply the sum of the different types, primarily HDL and LDL. So, if your HDL, the good cholesterol, is very high, your total cholesterol will also be high. Conversely, if your LDL, the bad kind, is dangerously high, your total cholesterol will also be high. You can't tell the difference just by looking at the total. Judging your health based on this one number is a dangerous gamble. A major study conducted at Johns Hopkins University showed conclusively that total cholesterol alone is a poor predictor of stroke risk. There were countless cases of people who suffered strokes despite having normal total cholesterol levels, and there were just as many people with high total cholesterol who were perfectly healthy. The number simply doesn't tell the whole story. I remember a patient, a 69-year-old retired accountant named Mr. Peterson. He came into my office in a state of high anxiety, his lab report trembling in his hand. His total cholesterol was 230, and he was convinced he was on the brink of a heart attack. We sat down and looked closer. Yes, his total was high, but it was primarily because his HDL was remarkably good. That was the good news, but hiding just beneath it was the bad news. His LDL was also elevated, well above the threshold of safety. I explained to him, Mr. Peterson, you can't celebrate the high HDL and ignore the high LDL. The HDL shows your body is trying to clean up, but the LDL shows there's a big mess to begin with. We need to focus on lowering that LDL. Thankfully, he listened. He started to change his diet and began a walking regimen. Today, his numbers are in a much healthier range. So, if you see a high total cholesterol number on your report, your very next step must be to look at the LDL. The total gives you a blurry snapshot. The LDL brings the real danger into sharp focus. Ignoring it can have devastating consequences. The next number that causes a lot of worry is triglycerides. This number is notoriously fickle. It can be heavily influenced by what you ate the night before your blood test. That's precisely why you're told to fast before a screening if you had a rich, fatty meal or a few alcoholic drinks the evening before. Your triglyceride level can skyrocket. Numerous studies have confirmed that a truly accurate triglyceride reading can only be obtained after a 12-hour fast. So, if your number comes back high, don't panic immediately. First, ask yourself, what did I eat last night? Did I follow the fasting instructions properly? Of course, if the number is consistently high, even when you fast correctly, then it's a problem that needs to be addressed. A 72-year-old gentleman, Mr. Miller, once came to see me, completely terrified. The day before his screening, he'd gone out for a celebratory steak dinner. The next morning, his triglycerides came back at over 500. He thought he was a walking time bomb. After we talked for a bit, I learned about his dinner party. I had him come back 2 weeks later, after carefully fasting, for a retest. This time, his triglycerides were perfectly normal. The crisis was averted. But then we looked at the rest of his chart, and that's when we found the real problem. His LDL, which had been overlooked in the panic over the triglycerides, was dangerously high. So don't overreact to the triglyceride number alone. Consider the context, and it's also a misconception that all dietary fat is the enemy here. Our bodies absolutely need healthy fats to function. The bigger issue, which we'll discuss in more detail, is often an excess of carbohydrates. The liver converts excess sugar from carbs into fat, which in turn can raise both triglycerides and cholesterol. Have you ever worried about a high triglyceride number? Now we come to the number that fools almost everyone. HDL. We've all been taught that HDL is the good cholesterol, and that's true. To a point. HDL acts like a fleet of garbage trucks, collecting excess cholesterol from the artery walls and hauling it back to the liver for disposal. So, naturally, we assume that the more garbage trucks you have, the cleaner your streets will be. This has led to a dangerous sense of complacency for many. But there's a catch. A high HDL number alone does not guarantee good health. In fact, several major clinical trials for drugs designed specifically to raise HDL were a spectacular failure. The drugs worked. They raised HDL levels, but they had no effect on reducing heart attacks or strokes. Some even caused harmful side effects. This taught us a critical lesson. Simply having a high HDL number on paper doesn't necessarily translate to better health in reality. What matters more is the ratio of HDL to LDL, and most importantly, the absolute level of your LDL. Mr. Davis, a 66-year-old avid golfer, was a perfect example. He was proud of his high HDL and felt invincible. He joked that he had supercharged good cholesterol. But when we looked at his full panel, his LDL was also quite high. He was so confident in his HDL that he was ignoring a major risk factor. I explained it to him this way. Mr. Davis, think of HDL as the cleanup crew in a factory. It's great to have a lot of workers, but if the factory is spewing out garbage at a frantic pace, even the best cleanup crew can't keep up. Your high LDL is the garbage factory working overtime. HDL is just one part of the equation. Having a lot of garbage trucks doesn't help if your city is producing mountains of trash every single day. So if you've ever felt relieved by a high HDL, that's understandable. But please remember, you must always look at the LDL right alongside it. And that brings us to the most important number in this entire story, the real protagonist, LDL cholesterol. This is the number with the most direct one is so scientifically proven link to stroke and heart attack risk. LDL's job is to transport cholesterol from the liver to cells throughout the body. But when there's too much of it, it starts to get stuck to the artery walls. This is what causes plaque, the hardening and narrowing of the arteries known as atherosclerosis. This is the process that silently leads to disaster. Multiple large-scale studies have shown that an LDL level of 160 mg/dL or higher puts you at a very high risk for a stroke or heart attack. Even a level over 130 should be a cause for serious concern. The problem is that so many people simply don't look at this number. They focus on their total cholesterol or their triglycerides and just skim right past the LDL. The story of Mr. Juan Williams, a 71-year-old man, is one I will never forget. 2 years before I met him, his annual screening showed an LDL of 170, but no one had ever sat him down and explained what that meant. So he did nothing. He went on living his life, feeling fine. Then, recently, he was rushed to the emergency room because he suddenly lost strength in his arm and leg. The diagnosis was a stroke that could have been prevented. If only someone had pointed to that number 2 years earlier and said, This is a problem. We need to fix this now. It's crucial to understand that LDL isn't inherently bad. It's a necessary substance. It only becomes a poison when the quantity is excessive. That's why an LDL level over 160 requires immediate action, whether through medication, diet, or both. Anything over 130 is a yellow flag demanding your attention. Have you ever checked your report and seen an LDL over 130? Finally, I want to share a fact that most people find shocking. Your cholesterol levels are often more influenced by the carbohydrates you eat than by the dietary fat you consume. Most people, when they want to lower their cholesterol, start by cutting back on meat and eggs. But the more significant culprit is often hiding in plain sight: bread, pasta, rice, and sugar. Research has now clearly established that over 80% of the cholesterol in your body is not from the food you eat, but is manufactured by your own liver. And the primary fuel for this manufacturing process is glucose. When you eat carbohydrates like bread, cereal, or pasta, your body breaks them down into glucose. Any glucose that isn't immediately used for energy is sent to the liver, where it is converted into fat and, in the process, cholesterol is produced as a byproduct. So, you could be eating a very low-fat diet. But if you're consuming a lot of bread, noodles, and sugary snacks, your LDL can remain stubbornly high. Mr. Thompson, a 6-7-year-old, was the classic case. He was determined to manage his cholesterol. He'd cut way back on red meat and fried foods, yet his LDL number wouldn't budge. When I took a detailed dietary history, the reason became clear. He loved bread. His day started with a bagel and jam. For lunch, he often had a large bowl of pasta or a sandwich on thick white bread. I suggested he try reducing his intake of refined carbohydrates. A few months later, his LDL had dropped significantly. Cutting back on refined carbs like white bread, pasta, and pastries is critically important. Please, remember this. Carbohydrates can raise your cholesterol more than dietary fat can. Have you been trying to manage your cholesterol by cutting back on meat, while still eating a lot of bread or rice? We've now looked at the 5 most common ways people misread their own health story. Now, let's turn the page. Let's talk about what you can actually do in your real life to lower your cholesterol and prevent a stroke. The very first, and perhaps most impactful, step you can take is to reduce your intake of refined carbohydrates. As we've discussed, glucose is the primary raw material your liver uses to make cholesterol. It's simple logic. Reduce the raw material, and you reduce the factory's output. Cutting back on rice, bread, pasta, and sugary foods will directly lower the amount of cholesterol your body produces. Now, going cold turkey on carbs can be difficult and stressful for your body. The key is to do it gradually. If you currently eat rice with all 3 meals, try cutting it down to 2. For 1 meal, replace the rice with extra vegetables and a source of lean protein instead of a sandwich for lunch. Try a large salad with grilled chicken or fish. Small changes, made consistently, are what lead to lasting results. A patient of mine used to eat 2 slices of toast with jam every morning. He switched to 1 slice of toast and added a boiled egg. For lunch, instead of his usual pasta, he started having a salad with baked fish. For dinner, he cut his portion of rice in half and filled the rest of his plate with steamed vegetables. After just 3 months of these simple changes, his LDL dropped from 150 to 120. Think about your meals from today. What was the biggest source of carbohydrates? Second is weight management. Your weight is directly linked to your cholesterol levels. Excess body fat, particularly visceral fat around your organs, signals the liver to produce more cholesterol. So, if your body mass index (BMI) is in the overweight or obese category, losing even a small amount of weight can make a big difference. But please, avoid crash diets. They often lead to a rebound effect where you gain all the weight back, and sometimes more. A healthy, sustainable rate of weight loss is about 2 to 4 pounds per month. Trying to lose weight too quickly puts stress on your body and is rarely successful in the long term. A great habit is to weigh yourself at the same time every day. Ideally in the morning after using the restroom. Keep a simple log. At first, you may not see much change, but after a month, you'll start to see a downward trend. One woman I worked with started charting her weight every morning. Seeing the small, steady progress motivated her to keep going. In 6 months, she lost 18 pounds, and her LDL level dropped right along with it. Third, prepare properly for your health screening. As we saw with Mr. Miller, the triglyceride number is highly sensitive to your recent meals. You must adhere to the 12-hour fast. On the evening before your test, avoid overeating, and especially avoid fatty foods and alcohol. The best practice is to stop eating anything except water after 7 p.m. to planned m. This will ensure your results are as accurate as possible. If you had an unavoidable company dinner or a celebration the night before your test, to be honest with your doctor, it may be better to reschedule the blood draw. Making decisions based on inaccurate data is worse than having no data at all. Fourth is the simple act of walking. You don't need intense, grueling workouts. Moderate aerobic exercise is incredibly effective at lowering LDL. Just walking is enough. Aim for at least 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Walking is low impact, easy on the knees, and accessible to almost everyone. If you have bad knees, start by walking on flat surfaces. If you're just beginning, start with 10 or 15 minutes and gradually increase the time. Consistency is far more important than intensity. Walking for 30 minutes every day is much more effective than walking for an hour once a week. I had a patient who started waking up at 6 a.m. every morning for a 30-minute walk. He said the first month was tough, but then he started to feel lighter and more energetic. At his 3-month checkup, his LDL had dropped by 20 points, and he'd lost 7 pounds, all from just walking. Fifth, reduce or eliminate alcohol and tobacco. Alcohol consumption negatively impacts cholesterol metabolism, and smoking directly damages your blood vessels. Tobacco is a particularly nasty culprit. It raises LDL, lowers HDL, and creates inflammation on the artery walls, making it even easier for cholesterol to stick and form plaque. It's the worst possible combination. Alcohol also prompts the liver to create more triglycerides and cholesterol. Ideally, you should quit both. But if that seems overwhelming, start by cutting back. Reduce your drinking by half. Cut down the number of cigarettes you smoke each day. If you're a smoker, consider using nicotine patches or other cessation aids. When you stop smoking, your vascular function begins to recover within weeks, and your cholesterol numbers can improve within months. Sixth is stress management. When you're under chronic stress, your body releases a hormone called cortisol, which has been shown to raise cholesterol levels. Stress also raises your blood pressure, further damaging your arteries. Learning to manage your stress is a crucial part of managing your cholesterol. Activities like meditation, deep breathing, or yoga can be very helpful. So can engaging in hobbies, talking with friends, listening to music, or spending time in nature. Getting enough sleep is also vital, as sleep deprivation increases stress hormones. A patient of mine started a simple 10-minute meditation practice before bed each night. At first, he found it hard to focus, but he stuck with it. Soon, he found his mind was calmer. He was sleeping better, and he woke up feeling more refreshed. At his next checkup, not only had his LDL improved slightly, but his blood pressure was down as well. Seventh, consume omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 seconds are fantastic for improving circulation and lowering triglycerides. They are abundant in fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, and sardines. Try to eat fish like this 2 or 3 times a week. If you can't eat fish regularly, an omega-3 supplement can be a good alternative. Omega-3 seconds also help reduce inflammation, which keeps your arteries healthy. However, don't overdo it with supplements, as very high doses can increase bleeding risk. A daily dose of 1 to 2 grams is generally appropriate. But as always, getting your nutrients from whole foods is best. One gentleman I know never really liked fish, but he started baking salmon once a week for his health. He found that with a little lemon juice and some herbs, it was actually quite delicious. At his next screening, his triglycerides had dropped significantly. 8th, and finally, stay hydrated. Drinking enough water improves blood circulation and helps your body flush out waste products. Aim for 1.5 to 2 liters of water per day. A great habit is to drink a full glass of water first thing in the morning, which helps to thin the blood that has concentrated overnight. Caffeinated drinks like coffee and tea can have a diuretic effect, meaning they can actually cause you to lose water, so they don't count toward your hydration goal. Sip water steadily throughout the day rather than chugging a large amount all at once. Try keeping a water bottle on your desk as a constant reminder. One patient, who admitted she rarely drank water, set a timer on her phone to remind her to have a glass every hour. At first, it was an inconvenience, but after a few weeks, her body adapted. She told me her skin looked better, and even her chronic constipation had resolved. All of these small, practical actions, when combined, create a profound change. A single number on a page starts to move, and as that number changes, your entire life can change with it. A small habit creates a big result. So let's bring this story to a close. We've looked at the numbers you see on your health report every year, and we've learned that misinterpreting them can lead you, without any symptoms, down a path toward a stroke or a heart attack. We've debunked the myths that a high HDL is an automatic pass, that total cholesterol is the only number that matters, that triglycerides are the main villain. The correct approach, the one that can save your life, is to understand your LDL number and adjust your lifestyle accordingly. An LDL over 160 is a red alert. An LDL over 130 is a warning sign. Ignoring these numbers can cost you your life, but managing them can preserve your health for a lifetime. So many people get their results and don't know what to look for. They see a slightly high total cholesterol and dismiss it. They worry about triglycerides, but the real story is in the LDL. It's the LDL that builds up on your artery walls, making them narrow and stiff. When the blood flow to your brain is blocked, you have a stroke. When the blood flow to your heart is blocked, you have a heart attack. So when you get that report, you must find the LDL number. If it's over 130, it's time to change your diet and start moving. If it's over 160, you need to have a serious conversation with a professional about more aggressive management, which may include medication. What happens if you manage this incorrectly? You feel fine for years, and then one day, without warning, you lose strength in your limbs. Your speech becomes slurred. You collapse. A stroke can lead to partial paralysis, or worse, death. A heart attack is the same. A sudden, crushing chest pain as your heart stops. The most terrifying part is that these things arrive without an announcement. But what happens if you manage it correctly? If you keep your LDL in a healthy range, your arteries stay clean and flexible. Blood flows freely, delivering oxygen and nutrients to your brain and heart. You can prevent these terrible diseases. You can live a long, healthy life and not be a burden to your family. I have seen so many patients who manage their health well, and they are thriving in their 70 seconds and 80 seconds. They take daily walks. They travel. They enjoy their hobbies. And I have seen the alternative, those who didn't manage it, who suddenly collapsed and are now bedridden, dependent on others for everything. The difference between these two futures begins with the understanding of one number, and here is one final crucial point I must make. Once an artery is severely blocked, it is incredibly difficult to reverse the damage. Once you have a stroke, returning to your former self is nearly impossible. You might not be able to speak clearly, to walk, to even feed yourself. Your family becomes 24-hour caregivers. The emotional and physical toll is immense for everyone, and all of that suffering, could have been prevented by looking at a single line on a lab report, the LDL number, and taking action, right now, at this very moment. Silent changes could be happening inside your arteries. If your LDL is high, it is slowly, steadily accumulating on the walls. You might feel fine today. You'll probably feel fine tomorrow, but after years of accumulation, you will reach a breaking point, and by then, it's too late. Symptoms often only appear when an artery is over 90% blocked. Until that point, you feel nothing. That is why it's called the silent killer. It progresses without a whisper, and then reveals itself in a catastrophic event. But there is hope. You can start today. It is not too late. If you change your diet and start exercising now, your arteries can become healthier. You can absolutely lower your LDL through lifestyle changes. Alone, I've had patients in their 70s who started managing their health for the first time and are now living vibrant lives in their 80s. One man, at age 73, had an LDL of 180. He cut back on carbohydrates and started walking every day. 1 year later, it was 130. 2 years later, it was down to 110. He is 78 now. He walks for an hour every morning and even goes hiking. His health screenings are perfect. This is something you can do, too. So here is one thing I want you to do today. Right now, pull out your most recent health report. Find your LDL number. If it's over 130, start today by reducing your carbohydrate intake and going for a walk. And make a habit of checking that number every year. A small practice, repeated, leads to a big change. Skipping 1 serving of rice today. Walking for 30 minutes today. Drinking 1 extra glass of water today. These tiny actions accumulate. In a month, you'll see a change on the scale. In 3 months, you'll see a change in your cholesterol numbers. And in a year, you will experience a completely different state of health. Take out that report. Look at your LDL number. This is the first step in protecting the health of your arteries and the health of your future. Do you get a screening every year or every 2 years? After hearing this story, have you looked at your LDL? What was the number? Your story can be a lesson and an inspiration for someone else. Let's build a healthy future together.